anyway, here we are, Cord versus Mokomi's team here, and we do have a game on a wood wall. We're being baited, I feel. This is not wood wall, KP. This is definitely not wood
Wait,
wall.
what? Wait, okay, I'm just going to check confirmation with Levert, the admin, that we are watching the right game, because we're meant to be on wood wall, but this is definitely not wood wall. This is Gorge again.
I mean, it's a gorgeous map, that's for sure, and I'm fine going for another Gorge game, but I've been hyped up for some wood wall action, so I definitely have to like reset my mind over here. Looking at this map, it also makes they get the wrong map. I mean,
Write it out,
baby.
baby.
If they realized.
They definitely didn't realize because we're not up to perfect live right now at this second. But we'll roll with it. You know, let them shine on through. So, looking at the layout of this, Eisman, this is a bit different already. The Japanese player taking the back position. It looks like Mokomi. Are we? Yeah, we've got a very different kind of approach from both sides because you have to remember you can sort of choose where the players spawn right based on their position in lobby. So a choice was made here to have Mokomi be the frontlining player for the north side team as the Abbasids, but then a complete pivot the other way, right? Ender's the back spawn player. But the weirdest part to me in this game, Lytical, is both of them are going eco wing.
Oh, that's an interesting one to take a look at, especially when you look at the core team, because it's one thing that you have the Abbasid player, but you do have HRE and its variant civilization, the Order of the Dragon, out there. And we've been talking about this, KP. What can these civilizations do in a team game setting? Now, we've been theory crafting for Woodwall because we were expecting that map to come up, but apparently they're playing on this map Gorge. So I'm actually very intrigued by the Order of the Dragon pick here, and I'm very curious how that's going to play out.
Yeah, especially as the central player. Typically, the central player is treated as more of a boomer. And the funny part about that is they've frontlined the HRE. Now, I would have expected this to be the other way around because you'd have the Order Dragon player who's a bit more immobile typically and can have very efficient units in Feudal Age. Meanwhile, the HRE can either play fast castle from center or support very quickly with marching drills type units, right?
Yeah, I'm actually really curious if we're going to see a lot of aggression in like early mid-game from Cord, or are they going to be super heavily towards the booming side of things? There's a Minework Palace on the way for the OOTD player. The other two players just going with the standard eco setup for their respective civilizations. Kura Storehouse for Mokomi, Eco Wing and Kremlin on the way. The Kremlin is fairly defensive. It's positioned such that it protects the large gold mine. So I kind of like these placements for the time being. But really, I think it's going to come down to what you can get out of these HRE variant civilizations over here in early mid-game.
By the way, I just want to give a big shout out to Kush and Uncopia. They're the guys that brought this together. So I think Kush is the one who originally done the team UI, and Uncopia gave it a little spruce over. Because I gotta say, the default one, I mean, we don't really talk too much about Capture Age as well, but the default experience is not so great, but considering the limitations, love the fact we've got all this info on screen to clearly look at fast instead of having to panic toggle through players. So, Minework is going to be the way for Order Dragon. That's kind of expected. Arkan coming out from Yikes. And, I mean, that's almost kind of a Yikes. That's a bit weird to me. Like, front player is opening with stables.
It's interesting. It's Scouts. It's actually a professional Scouts build here from Yikes. Something that we haven't really seen for a long time, but it makes a ton of sense here with a civilization like HRE. You do have the Akken buff. Combine that with survival techniques and deer being brought in, you do have a juggernaut food economy.
Now, what's interesting is on the other side, there is a Roost player, but they're not opting for this strategy, which surprises me, because if you remember a long time ago, the meta in 3v3s, this was, of course, back when, well, it was better to actually go for Pro Scouts. But the go-to was you picked Roost, you spammed a lot of Scouts, you went Pro Scouts, and then you provided food for the entire team.
I think one key thing to look at when you look at Pro Scouts is that in a 1v1 setting, you only have, on a normal map, 4 large deer patches to work with. So the amount of deer that you can get is somewhat limited. But here, you do have a lot more deer to work with because the amount scales with the amount of players you have on the map. So that investment can be justified a lot better in team games compared to 1v1s.
Yeah, basically when you play on a 1v1 map, there's a maximum of 9,800 food available, right? And then because you add in an extra 2 deer per player, the number snowballs, as we can see on the map. So definitely a fair point. And it's also much harder to block out all the Pro Scout grabs, whereas when you're in a 1v1, after the first or second deer pack gets yoinked, you become very predictable in where you move.
It also restricts you strategically, if you think about it. Like, when you play 1v1s, you have to open with a stable, but that also means that you have to play cavalry. You have to make army, because if you don't, you just get destroyed. In a team game setting, it's somewhat different, because you do have your teammates kind of providing that army for you, at least at the early part of the game. And we do have these Gilded Horsemen coming out here for the HRE player, which, in a way, act as like proxy knights. They're not as tanky. Their damage output isn't as great as it is for the knights either, but they are definitely more formidable than normal horsemen are, and when you look at them as raiding units, they do almost as much damage as knights do.
Now, the interesting thing to your whole point, they're not as tanky. In some ways, they are against knights in particular. Low base damage units, the fact they have no melee armor versus a few melee armor, is a big difference, right? But compared to knights, it's a bit of a weird way to look at it, but 19 damage into, say, 2 armor, if you had it with 3 armor instead, you know, you're not mitigating much the overall damage. So that raw HP kind of matters more, because overall it's still going to take more hits than if you had, say, 5 armor and substantially less health here. And what I love about this is this should be a sling, I'd say, of the Deer 2 green for the particular role of spamming these horsemen, because they are bloody good raiders with that 15 damage.
And they're quick. They allow you to chase down knights, they allow you to chase down scouts as well. And when you look at that, Yikes is now aging up to the Castle Age. It's going to be Burgrave Palace. He's going to be facing the floating gate as well, so Mounted Samurai will likely be the thing. And I feel like this is actually a reasonable way of playing this for Cord. If they go heavy on the Spearman initially from the Burgrave, you could take those Mounted Samurai out quickly, but
hold up,
you do see a range as well from Red here.
Yep. We are getting some particular ladies on horseback here.
Onamusha. I love that. I absolutely adore that, because Onamusha essentially renders that Burgrave Palace near useless. They are fairly decent against spearmen unless you get swarmed, and they are very, very good against men-at-arms. Basically, anything that the HRE can bring in infantry-wise, the Onamusha will eat for breakfast.
Now, the annoying part is the amount of micro-attention it requires. That's one of the things that usually kind of frustrates people a bit. I actually highly advise, even more so in games this big, Kaburiya. Kaburiya, by the time you have 10 Onamusha, is huge here, because it means no type of unit can gap close. That is especially going to be important here, considering you are already up against Gilded Horsemen that do counter you.
Exactly. Gilded Horsemen do have bonus damage against light units. Archers, that is. So if they can gap close to these Onamusha, they die very, very quickly. Only 80 base HP. Those Horsemen are quick. They do have bonus against these Onamusha. You really can't stand and fight against Gilded Horsemen with those.
Yikes. Well, there's a bigger yikes right now. It looks like he forgot to pick up the extra deer. More on the way home. This could be very important for the flood point. The biggest yikes is kind of like the fact that we aren't even getting some that can dive the enemy TCs. He's being forced to go into Spearman to open here.
I just feel like you go heavy into Spearmen, but that does not counter anything that you have from the opposing team. Well, maybe except for the Knights on the other side. But you do have Camel Archers as well being mixed in by Mokomi in orange. And those Camel Archers will debuff the enemy cavalry. Combine that with Knights and Onamusha, you have an insane amount of mobility and a unit composition that can counter essentially everything from Cord.
Yeah, the other interesting thing to me is, like, looking at right now, I think the biggest value point actually for the Southside team is to get Ender up an age, because he's scaling into archers. You really want the composite bows to get value out of that. At that point, you counter the Camel Archers, you counter the Onamusha. You pretty much screw over everything that the Northside team are doing, but they're not really giving the room for that right now. You can see it's actually instead just doubling down on archers now.
Big push now coming up. Walls are complete here, at least on the front side, so that gives a bit of a buffer here for Mokomi. His expansion TCs to the front. This is not a very tanky town center, so this is definitely a great target here for Cord. And it looks like those Pink Knights will engage over here. They want to save this town center.
Spear's going to wipe them out. The Gilded Horsemen are standing their ground, but getting wiped out quickly because of it. Now, the Ram should at least be able to get through the TC, but the problem I'm seeing here, it feels like a little bit of a missed micro there. Really, you want to let the Spearmen through and save the Gilded Horsemen for the back line. Instead, Orange, maybe with an opportunity to try and hold here, but they need more troops to deal with the Spearmen. The problem is that assistance isn't coming from Eisman. Onimusha are not going to clear up veteran spearmen fast.
Slowly but surely, this aggression is cleaned up. Villagers are being told to take out the Rams. They're a little body blocked as well. Rams will get pushed back, and it looks like Mokomi's team will hold. Just one side note to add over here, KP. Some of those Gilded Horsemen early on in this fight, they've been attacking a lumber camp with torches. And I feel like part of the reason why they got cleaned up so easily is because those Gilded Horsemen weren't fighting the Knights for some time.
I think I'm sorry, I was switching the UI around for chat. So the biggest problem I'm seeing here though is they now need to go and attack, because what you have to keep in mind is, like, great, you held your base, you did lose the TC. The other issue you have to consider is that this is a front-facing HRE player who has been picking up relics, and the big worry I have is down the line they might just switch this around in a weird fashion. And what I mean by that is they might potentially just give Darrow all the relics after he goes Regnants.
I feel like now it's a matter of mobility. Once the pressure is gone from the base of Mokomi's team, or the bases of Mokomi's team, suddenly you have a fully mobile army. Onimusha, Camel Archers, and Knights. Something that you can just use to run circles around the enemy. So on the opposing side for Cord, I would love to see some more walls, because they will definitely need it. Otherwise, they just don't have the mobility to chase down that army.
Yeah, and the other thing that's still kind of missing from me is a movement out of this age. Ender, even though they're almost where they need to be when it comes to the resources, they're just choosing to double down on Rams here, which I don't think really helps you here, right? Like, I think at this stage, the age of Rams has kind of passed. It done decent damage, but the longer you do this, the kind of worse it gets. I think the biggest advantage point right now for this comp is getting Abbasid into composite bows. Mass archers at that point will disintegrate everything on the other side.
Oh, certainly. It's a matter of, again, making sure that those Onimusha won't run circles around you. At the same time, we have just one Castle Age player still on each of these teams. But there's a chance that Mokomi is thinking about aging up at this point. He's piling up a lot of resources, including a lot of wood. The other players are fairly far away from Castle Age still. We're already seeing some of those Knights swooping in. Kind of what we talked about, KP. You have that high mobility, you gotta use it.
That's the power on a map like Gorge. Gorge, that when you think the game's going late, you can quickly wall up. It's very difficult to just quickly wall up on a map this wide, especially if the cavalry continues to flood. And that's a big advantage you have to keep in mind. Like, when you consider these two civs, like, one can play cav very organically with 2/3 of their comp. The other is an infantry civ matchup through and through, right? HRE, Order the Dragon. You know, there used to be the expectation of Knights when you're trying to rush Castle Age, but we know that's not really the way that team games work. In team games, you're giving in a unit comp that you're meant to commit to.
Deep dive over here. Tower's a little late, and it looks like we have a lot of Rams to work with. Onimusha fighting head-on against Abbasid Archers is not a good matchup. You definitely need your Knights back here. Here they come. Rams a little undefended here, but that's not all the Knights that Pink has.
No.
At least for their sake, I hope so.
Oh, the bigger worry I've got here is that's 5 Rams on the primary TC, and I don't see how Mokomi's meant to hold this. Archdive continues to go deeper. Knights are seeing an exposure point, but Blue has enough infantry nearby that this count from Pink isn't going to make a difference. And in fact, you're right, there are more Knights just idled up on the flanks right now. They're chilling when they should be killing.
Yeah, I think he just forgot about them, but they are desperately needed in this fight. Because the problem is that you need something that tanks up that arrow fire, something that dispatches those archers. Onimusha will die very, very quickly to mass foot archers. DC is still being repaired over here. Many villager casualties on the back line. DC will still go down, though. There is just way too many Rams to deal with. And this is as bad as it gets here for Mokomi. Villagers will be lost. TC will be lost as well. And I guess it could get even worse, because now the Spearmen are gap closing to the Onimusha. And the Onimusha are very fragile. You cannot stand and fight here.
And it's even worse than that. This was a 2v3, essentially, right? Look at what Darrow's been doing. He was hoarding. He wasn't committing. He was going for the tech up instead. Funnily enough, going for a Burgrave themselves. I'm a little bit surprised. I think Regnants would have been the perfect transition point here. But still, damage being done in a 2v3. I think if Darrow adds anything to these pushes, this should be a quick GG.
Yeah, I agree. I'm somewhat surprised about the Burgrave myself. I can see them trying to just capitalize on this momentum and finishing the game quickly. But it would have been very nice to see Gilded Knights roaming the map from him. Alongside, of course, relics being collected into Ragnar's Cathedral. He might just go heavy on infantry. But the reality is that the army is just not looking great here from Mokomi's team. They still have 2 players in Feudal Age. and neither of those players are close to Castle at this point. Not much standing army for Pink at this point. He's just down to 7, Mokomi at 13. And really, he needs to be careful not to get completely wiped out over here, because his House of Wisdom is going to be the next target for these Rams.
Nah, and of course we have to remember now in team games, if you lose all your landmarks, you're not out, right? It's a joint effort, team effort, but it's pretty painful in any game where you end up losing that House of Wisdom. You know you have to repair an insanely chunky structure eventually. You also lose out on a Golden Age. Admittedly, there's not much for Golden Age here, and the Tier 1 barely alive. But even that is now being taken away. Not something you often say at 17 minutes into a game featuring the Abbasids, but it's fair to say at this point, everything is on Eisman to recover this game. He's the only one in Castle Age, and if we're being totally real, he's the only one with anything that you would call an army.
Yeah, he's trying to make a switch into infantry. Samurai are now coming in. In fact, he's gotten a Katana Bannerman over here, so he's going to try to buff that infantry, but then again, you're going to be up against double HRE, and sure enough, Samurai do have deflective armor, but you will still be annihilated when you face massive amounts of mace infantry from the HRE.
I think they're at risk of being annihilated in 2 minutes. Ender's on the way up as well. So 3 Castle Ages versus 1, a second one coming in, but Mokomi, no. No. All right, this is a rare sight. It's not often you see someone lose their House of Wisdom mid-tech up, but if they don't push this back right now, that's going to happen. They have to make the choice to go in. Looks like it's just enough to push this away, and that's courtesy of the fact that Ender decided to go for a tech up instead of doubling down on the military.
Yeah, they live to see another day, but they've been battered very, very heavily. They will be facing 3 Castle Age players. Arakan is still very far away from Castle Age, but he does have a lot of gold. He's struggling a little bit with the food. Doesn't have a massive standing army, though.
Oh my God.
And in the meantime, we do have some great raids coming in. You kind of touched on this, KP. Green hasn't really been fighting a lot recently. And basically, this push was all made by 2 players. Once the third one shows up with some Gilded Knights and Horsemen, suddenly the position of Mokomi's team gets a lot worse.
And these Gilded Knights are brutal, right? The reality is, even if they don't have a lance attack, 2 strikes to kill a villager without textiles. And, you know, Mr. Eisman, he didn't have that on the flank. Onimusha are now moving out there. If they can actually get close quick enough, great. The problem is the Kabola Yar being triggered not on the Gilded Knights means it's a bit harder to pursue this. In the meantime, Eisman losing additional economy. I mean, it shows the numbers, right? Like 38, 91, 57, 52, 58, 58. And Ender is on top of the world. Darrow, his economy is a little bit questionably small at this stage, but that's just the reality of Order the Dragon, right? They tend to lag behind the villagers.
Yeah, it's the classic OOTD thing. Nothing to see here, really. See, all the Onimusha had to be pulled to the south to chase this away, which once again opens up that front line for aggression. Just a side note, Ender is sitting at 64 foot archers right now. That is crazy. That's going to wipe out everything that they have on the opposing side. I would dare to say that with composite bows, those archers are enough to wipe out all the samurai even.
They got everything on the way. Veterancy, composite bows, boot camp as well. I think the only thing that might be missing is Steeled Arrow level 2, but I imagine that won't be too far behind, especially with this being an eco-wing build, where the farm count is already looking respectable. I think he's up at 16. He's got some extra resources to chip through. This man has eaten through the primary wood line, by the way. This has been quite the heavy leverage of rams and archers.
Tell me you're not looking at your villagers without telling me that you're not looking at your villagers.
What? Like I've got other things to do in a game, Lytical. Like, if I just send them the wood, they just gather wood. They never run out.
That's an ambitious claim because he's about to run out of this wood line. At least with this nitrate, he realizes that A, he's running out of wood, B, that he doesn't have any lumber camps nearby.
I think he's probably going to pivot west side. This is one of those things where you want a combined effort of eco-focus. That way you can kind of, focus on defending one area instead of 2.
Just a side note, that wall to the left of Teal's base is unfinished. It doesn't actually span all the way to the wood line.
That would be great if Arakan had enough knights to send in here right now.
I mean, you have a huge group of Onimusha coming in from the right side. I think they slipped by on the right side. And they are crazy raiding units. But the problem is that now you have to find a way to stop this. At the same time, all 3 sacred sites under the control of Cord as well. Mangonel's men-at-arms will be on the way. And this is 87 archers on the side of Ender ready to pounce the base of Mokomi.
I mean, this is like a death push. You could wipe out the base with this.
Oh, yeah.
Onimusha raids at least coming in, so that could be a little bit frustrating, but 1 or 2 Mangonels could easily clean this up. This is not a comp that can dive any type of defense whatsoever, and if they ever see an outpost from the HRE or Order the Dragon, you have to be a little bit paranoid that you might be running into a Springwood emplacement. you know, the crazy part, looking back at this game, I actually think this should have been over about 3 minutes ago. If I had to highlight one mistake, and the killing instinct is important here, by the way, Cord's choice to go for Castlades on the Abbasids instead of doubling down army, I think they were on the verge of winning this game before that, right? Like, they didn't actually need the Castlades, but they are at least back now. The dive is getting deeper than it's ever been so far. And with the double Mangonel holding this hostage, it's difficult to deal with. Sprimmels are at least coming out to try and contest this. In the meantime, House of Wisdom and TC looking to go down. Makomi might not need it for the tech up anymore, but he's sure as hell going to miss it for the eco.
You have 40 Samurai on the other side, so there might be a way back into this game, but Mokomi is getting beaten up very, very badly.
Onomushirin on the Enders, villagers, seal on the backside. I mean, why are they even here, Lidda? There's literally 2 trees to die for over that.
This is exactly what Mokomi's team needs to get back into this game. A lot of raids, because right now Oraken has basically no standing army. Mokomi still has a decent economy working, and when you have all these Samurai coming out here supported by Mangonels, you might have a way of pushing this back.
Samurai trying to push against it. Love this from Ender, just trying to hold in the choke point, but he actually really needs blue to engage him. Mango Smack comes in big. It's going to be trade on the back lines. And this is what I was waiting for, right? I think Yikes is trying to bait the Samurai out of the choke point so the land stack and the men-at-arms can overwhelm. But it's got to be said, Eisman, I mean, this count is holding firm for the time being at 40. The question mark is how much longer can it hold for, because this archer mass is getting out of control.
Yeah, the problem is that those Samurai are slowly getting decimated. It's just death by 1,000 cuts. It's so many archers on the other side. And the HRA player does have bases on those men-at-arms. Knights are swooping in. They do take out the Mangonels, at least one of them. Onamush are still raiding, but when you look at the army numbers, it's twice the army right now for Darrow's team. Those Mangonels from Mokomi are getting some good value for themselves, but the front line is just disintegrating at this point.
That's the thing. I'd actually call the micro from the West Side team suboptimal, right? Like, they're just basically headbutting giant rocks coming towards them, but it just doesn't matter due to the raw force. Now, credit where credit is due. Mr. Eisman is Mr. Cleanup here with the Onomushi mass on the backside, but even after all is said and done, I don't think Ender cares too much. He's still about 90 eco. These villages are cheap to replace, and he still has a sizable force on the front line.
Yeah, that's the big problem. You see, you also have like 12 or so archers in queue as well for Ender, and he still has 60 of them standing on the field. Now, if this army on the front line ever gets cleaned up, it could be dicey for Cord, because they've lost a lot of eco. But until this force is cleaned up, they should still be in the driver's seat.
Military numbers are still a very big sticking pain here. You've more or less just got Samurai to defend with, and that is it. Now, the thing that worries me there is Yikes does have a decent number of Landsneck in the mix, son. Oh, if they get on top of this. Makomi, look at the health bars on those villages.
Oh my lord,
give me a nibble.
Could be
Give me a nibble.
Nasty.
Sorry, correct noises. Ah! Makomi, that's everything. That's basically the entire remnant of his economy.
Yep. That's exactly it. He's at 16 villagers and 14 of them are running for their lives. He's just gone. He's out of this game for the time being. That keep is not going up. And at the same time, Darrow is on the way to Imperial as the first player out there. Onamusha raids still doing some damage, but the economy is still very much intact. They have a 50 eco lead overall. And that's massive when you consider that one of those players is an Order of the Dragon player.
That's the wild part, right? Like 42 eco doesn't sound crazy. We're looking at the fact that this is just going to inflate to a ridiculous degree. I mean, we're already at a stage where Darrow, what's the farm count at? He's looking great here. 23 is pretty decent for this server at this stage in the game. And now the Palace of Swab in the tree line, we're just going to see a boom up of even more farms in the coming minutes. So what do you do?
You still have these Gilded Horsemen roaming the map. Again, when you look at that middle push, we didn't really see much of a green force in the middle. Darrow has just been using this opportunity given by the teammates to boom up and now snowball the game once he's in Imperial. Speaking of Imperial, Yikes is also aging up to Imp, so you're going to be looking at 2 Imperial Age HRE players out there.
Yeah, that's the biggest Yikes, right? It's back-to-back Palace of Swabia boomers right after each other in a game where... Oh, poor Makomi, man. He's like, can I play HRE next time, please? 21 villages. That primary TC in House of Wisdom, I would be surprised if they ever get repaired in this game now.
Yeah, it just feels near impossible at this point. There's a Sacred Site timer ticking in the favor of Cord. you have a massive equally 2 Imperial Age players on their side. Army count is also much, much bigger. Really, I just don't really see a way back right now for Makomi's team at this point.
No, they're hanging in there, right? Every point matters here. They didn't want to give it over easily. I think at this point, Mr. Eisman, more than anyone else, is too deeply invested. They're like, oh, Eisman, this is not fun. Can we just go to the next one? It's like, no. I watched that really good movie, The Last Samurai. That fight looked incredible. I want that moment of glory. He's got 65 samurai ready to fight.
I mean, to be fair, the opposing team doesn't have Gatling guns, so he's got better chances than the samurai had in that movie.
So what you're saying is Order the Dragon needs to do late game Order the Dragon. 10 culverins. Let's go.
Well, to be fair, 65 samurai is no joke, especially when you buff them with Katana Bannerman.
That is true.
But you do need some damage output units. I think that's the thing that we are missing from Makomi's team. Samurai will hold the line, but they do need Mangonels on the back line to take those units out. One problematic thing here for Cord is that they don't have any anti-siege. No Culverins, no Springolds. So right now, those Mangonels could do a lot of damage to these archers.
Oh, God. We've got a trader. Ender. I mean, he needs to lose some economy or military first. This guy is sitting fully fat. I think he's getting ready to go up, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at a trade wing here. I mean, at that stage, it should be, what, hand cannoneers from the Abbasids. Probably, I think, Order the Dragon, best comp, in my opinion, to this day, is Mass Landsknecht. Mass Landsknecht, I don't know if you noticed this, Lidicors, statistically, they're over-buffed. I think they have way too much health for what they do.
Yeah, and when you look at team games, I think one of the key things to look at is that you do have supporting units. It's not like you're using a glass cannon army exclusively. You have units from your teammates that will soak up some of the damage, so it keeps your Landsknecht alive a lot longer, allowing you to just decimate the enemy. On the opposing side, at least all 3 players are now in Castle Age. But Makomi, I mean, he's at 35 population. This is basically a 2v1 or a 3v2 right now.
I just love the way. Oh yeah, the least all in Castle Age looks at the other side, double imp, and about to be triple imp. It's a grim affair. I mean, the worry I have, you have to remember this. I mean, this is the second game on Gorge. Hope they remember to change map for the next one. But you know, the reality is like that could be the difference, right? Not this game, but the next one. And the fact you're hanging in there for what feels like an inevitable loss, if we're being totally real here, right? Like we're not talking players that have been playing competitive for X years and they're used to just compartmentalizing those losses. Something we mentioned when we got into this series is the idea that like the beautiful thing about team games, you can blame someone else. I mean, is there a creeping worry there, right? Like, do you just look at your teammate and go, oof, if only they had done something different here?
Yeah, I feel like one part of the equation is lack of information from Makomi's team. They do have a bit of a raiding party over here that's some decent-ish harassment done, but besides knowing that 2 opposing players are an Imperial, they don't really know the extent of or the magnitude of that eco-escalation we have on the other side. They don't know that there's trade already being set up. They haven't really seen this army up until this point, so I think they're just now realizing how bad their position really is. You know, up until you don't see your enemy at your gates, you're hoping that your position is better than what it actually is.
Now I think they're in for the bad news. The only upside right now is I think there's a little bit of mistake made here. No one brought Springles to deal with the siege, so the Age of Siege is keeping them alive, but considering that you have 3 civs on the other side, all about to be Imperial Agent, all capable of building culverins. If Mangoes is the way you're meant to hold, I think now you're going to run out of the way of saving yourself in this game.
Just a side note here. Again, we're just looking at 2 armies in the middle. Darrow is building up a lot of Gilded Horsemen. And at this point of the game, you need to spread out if you're Makomi's team. And those Gilded Horsemen will start raiding the eco. You also have 8 gold miners in total for your entire team. So you're kind of stuck in Castle Age with no gold access at this point.
You also have 90 archers running into whatever's left of Makomi. He's like, there could be only one Abbasid king! Oh, God.
He's looking for villagers, but Makomi is like, well, I ain't got none.
Finding villagers is like finding hen's teeth. They're that bloody rare right now. Makomi barely up to 32 economy. And meanwhile, in the center, blue just looking to hold on up against red here. Culverins are going to start sniping out the siege. Remember, there are Landsknecht in the mixer here, which means these samurai are getting whittled down slowly but surely. And on the backside, what was originally Makomi's problem may quickly turn into Mr. Eisman's as well, as Ender is getting ready to dive the Shogunate Castle.
Oh man, oh if there is an overchop, then this game might just be over. I mean, I was looking at those archers. Right now, the ones that we have in the middle, they just run into the samurai to get butchered. These archers could have actually won the fight in the middle. Because they are not here, the samurai are still holding, but now you have the Gilded Horsemen on the way.
Which is
these
sick,
are
by the way.
Imperial Age Gilded Horsemen as well, so they will do fairly well against all these samurai.
That's the thing. Like, if you send infantry, you're actually giving a good fight for Eisman. If you send horsemen, weirdly enough, you have more effective HP in these fights because you're removing a substantial 4 damage increase per strike. And they're just ridiculously tanky. Darrow has enough eco to keep pumping them non-stop. You already see what, 20 more in the field. Meanwhile, the samurai count, which was up to what, almost 80 at one stage, down to just 40. We don't talk about Makomi, who is right now basically losing a TC to Archer Fire.
I mean, that must feel sad. Just imagine the team communications right now. They're like, dude, we're holding the middle. We are still in this. It's like, hey, I'm losing my TC to 60-something archers.
Like, but that doesn't make sense. You repair it with wood, and they're just adding more wood to the foundation. Nope, nope.
But that's flaming wood, KP.
Well, there's no ensnare arrows here. This is just raw power of the composite bows coming through. He's finally going to build a ram. About bloody time.
It takes more time to build the ram than to take the tower out with the archers, by the way.
Don't. They'll nerf Abbasids again if you keep this up. Oh, blimey. Well, we're only 3.5 minutes away from a Sacred Side victory. I guess they're going to stick it out. I don't really see them ever decapping. By some miracle, Eisman has found a small group of samurai all the way across map into the back economy. Honestly, I feel like the enemies produce villagers quicker than these samurai can kill them.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. And they want to transition to trade, by the way, so they're actually happy losing villagers. They get replaced by traders instantly.
Wait, the Ender, leave him alone. This is bullying at this stage. He's like, where's Makomi? Poor guy. Right, you see on the screen up here in the north that little lumber camp being built? Did you know that that is a third of Makomi's economy?
Oh, the poor guy.
33 minutes into a game,
he's got an
baby.
enemy tower right next to him, by the way. That is not his tower. That's a teal tower.
He's like, Abbasids, can we not just be friends? I'd love to be on your side, Ender. Not this game, buddy. At this point, I think it's a foregone conclusion. I can't remember if Makomi, Eisman, and Rakan won their first game. I hope to keep it interesting they did, because this looked like an absolute shellacking. And you said it a few times in this game. The reality is, like, Green, he didn't look present that much. He was doing other things on the side, right? Like, this, a lot of the time, was 2 players piling onto 3 and coming out ahead.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily something that you have to treat as a negative. They understood that it's enough to have 2 players in the middle and have a third one that's just booming up.
Now hold on a sec. If you're the Northside team, you view this as a negative, Lytical.
well, yeah, if you're Northside team, but if you're the Southern team, then you just say, listen, you have the OOTD, you're going to be an absolute juggernaut late game with these premium units. He actually did a lot of work when it comes to raids on the flanks. He contained the enemy quite a bit. And it also allowed him to be the first to Imperial, get that eco booming, potentially get some trade up, and just keep sending in wave after wave of cavalry to raid.
Thank God. Makomi was about to go down to single-digit villages. I'm glad this is over for him. That guy needs counseling, and if this team wins the entire tournament, I hope they put some of that prize pool towards helping the guy out.